Many people ask me, is there such a thing as the end of a relationship, and how to deal with relationships when one discontinues relationship or walks away out of relationships. Usually in spirituality, we neglect relationships, or we hear all these pseudo ideas of spirituality that we need to stay celibate, we need to be alone in order to attain something spiritually, or we need to run away into the woods and remain there by ourselves. First of all, we need to understand what is relationship. Many people do not understand it, and they are trying to discover the answer to this question for as long as they live. And everyone has to contemplate on this topic, because no matter how much we're trying to avoid it, we're surrounded by people. Human beings are social beings. And even though we're living in the midst of the dark ages, it doesn't mean that we can't understand the essence of relationships. And relationships do make us more spiritual, because they reflect on our inner insecurities, or they help us to trigger all the distortions, victimization programs, and so on. So basically, a relationship becomes a tool for the refinement. Yet many times the issue is how to sustain the relationship, because nowadays relationships break since there is access to the internet. There are lots of people available out there, and there is a feeling that we can have relationship with the whole world. After all, we are a collective consciousness, and no matter how separate we appear physically, we are all a part of the collective. And this is, in a way, our journey, spiritual journey, to discover that and to realize that eventually, and to exit this realm with this realization. But before we exit the realm, we need to understand what has brought us here and what is keeping us here. This realm appears to be a bit of a trap, and yet it doesn't mean that we have to suffer here, because for most of the people, suffering is nothing but pain, emotional pain, mental pain, and so on. So what is the relationship, and how to understand it for each of us? So I'm just sharing here my understanding on the subject. So you can take something out of it, and the rest you can discover yourself through your own experience and contemplation. Relationship is most of the time, or always, first of all, an idea. We do have certain people in our lives, like, for example, we have family, and one of the family members dies. Does it mean that we discontinue our relationship with that person, or that person stops relating to us? Actually not, because the idea of that person still remains in our consciousness. We are still mentally and many times emotionally connected to that person. So the physical disappearance of anyone does not discontinue the relationship with that person or that being. And many times people report that even after someone has departed from this physical plane, they still feel the presence, because many souls have trouble leaving this plane, or something attaches them to others, or they feel a need to connect to their bodies and keep on experiencing life through their family members, which is sad, because in ancient times, in many ancient cultures, the point of spirituality was living life consciously and preparing ourselves, or kind of conscious way of exiting this realm and leaving this realm for good. So there was a spiritual knowledge involved in here, how to exit this realm and not to come back to it. So the whole spirituality was based on it. And so far, whether we are aware of it or not, whether we entertain our minds with spirituality or spiritual ego or narcissism, imagining that spirituality is about some kind of superpowers and so on, we first of all neglect the whole idea of what liberation is and what it is all about. So liberation is always about leaving this realm consciously, exiting this realm consciously, and during the life you are realizing what this illusion is about, what holds you here, and how to exit it. So in ancient time, people did not create all these taboos about escapism, about relationships, about anything like that. Now, in our current life, we are not able to understand many points, and we create our own ideas, mix them with already existing ideas. Now, so we don't kind of understand that our perception of reality is very limited. So let's say we are not preparing ourselves to exit this world. So many souls get trapped, or they are not able to liberate themselves. And so the idea of yogic liberation is also around that. The term moksha was always related to that you prepare yourself during life, you live a certain type of life to live long and free from pain in a content, equanimous state. And then by the time you feel that this is it, you exit this plane, you exit this realm. Now, in order to understand now what keeps us here, a relationship is the best tool, because first of all, we see how we relate to family members. So the first level of relationship is always about our family and ancestors. And it has always been also in indigenous cultures. Ancestors were very much respected, family relationships were respected. At the moment, in most of the societies, family is not understood in a correct way. So we don't see our family members as the foundation for our spiritual understanding of the self, and how these relationships shape our understanding of the conditional self. So the relationship with the family pushes up all the distortions at first. So our first interpretation of life, our first idea, so-called, of life comes from these relationships, right? So, and when we go already into the adulthood and we meet our partners, we potentially attract people who would trigger the same feelings in us, or would arise the same feelings, or would resemble one of our family members, or would resemble our deep distortions or impressions in our consciousness, which we maybe are not aware of, or we're not aware of the roots of them, because the roots could be from previous existences or previous embodiments, yet they're still there. And so we tend to choose certain partners because of these distortions. Once we awake and we break through this understanding, we realize that all these points which pushed us to attract certain partners are no longer there. And that's why the attraction also fades away. But what is relationship again? Is it just the feeling within us? First of all, the relationship starts with the idea that I relate to this person. Sometimes people suffer just because the idea shifted. Let's say you have distant relationship, and the next day your partner said that they no longer want to be in a relationship, but they want to be your friends, for instance, and you suffer like anything. You cannot deal with this thing. But what has changed? Nothing has changed. Just the idea that one of the partners wants to change the status. The status is just an idea. It's in your head, it's in their head. The distance is still separating you. If one partner says, I no longer want to be in a relationship with you, it doesn't mean that the relationship has ended. It means that now you have created some kind of a boundary within your head in the form of an idea that you no longer can be close to this partner, or the partner has created a boundary in front of you. But it doesn't mean that the relationship discontinues. Actually, to end the relationship smartly, wisely, takes a long time for many people. And it takes sometimes years to really discontinue a relationship, to cut off all the mental, emotional ties and the feelings that arise within our system on a cellular level, on a muscle level, when we think about these partners. And that's why partnership has to be always addressed in a very wise way, rather than just throwing yourself to the arms of anyone who gives you a bit of comfort and warmth. Relationship is very important because we're choosing the partner who would be able to walk with us along the path, and who would reflect us or help us to see our own distortions, conditionings. And on the other hand, there is some kind of a deeper connection of like-mindedness or affection that is keeping us, so that no matter how we're reflecting ourselves, we're still able to walk along with this partner on the path. And we see the value and the appreciation of that. And it's not about that the partner gives us something or doesn't give us anything. So it's a more mature approach, yet give and take will always be present in any relationship. Whether you give on a material level and someone gives you back on an emotional level, but give and take will always be there. Because on the physical and emotional plane, in this reality we're living in, this is inevitable. It's the way the engine of this reality and our existence goes on. And there has to be some kind of an energy exchange in any relationships, on whichever level. So if you understand that and you consciously get involved with anyone, you see what they're able to give you, how they're able to support you, and how you are ready to support them. In any relationship, you should always understand that, especially if you're on a spiritual path to self-discovery and realization, that whatever happens in your life, it's never about them. It's always about you. And that's why the best question to ask yourself is, what have I contributed to this situation? Or how do I feel in this situation? Because first of all, you are to work with your own feelings and own ideas. So if you realize that when someone says, I don't want to be with you anymore, it's not about you, it's about them. It's their choice, it's their understanding. Now for you, nothing happened except the fact that they changed the idea. Their idea changed your idea. And now you're suffering because of the idea that triggers certain emotional response within you. So many a time, like between, let's say if someone discontinued relationships on the relationship on Monday, and on Tuesday you found out about it, nothing happened between Monday and Tuesday. What happened is that your idea about your world, about you in this world, but all this created illusion around this relationship has changed. And so you face the fact that you had the illusion, of permanence about this relationship. But no relationship can be permanent, because our life is not permanent. Because no matter how long we live, eventually we will exit this realm. And that's what we have to consciously prepare us if we are on a spiritual path. And especially with relationships, we have to treat relationships wisely. And we can only do this if we have this awakened being, which is content, which first of all allows us to experience the unity within ourselves, the contentment. You cannot love or relate to anyone if you are not content, because love is in fact equanimity and contentment. If you cannot experience contentment, when you relate to others, you will experience the arising of the distortions within. And so you will try to project it on others and sometimes blame them or feel that this is their fault or you are a victim, because you would need to trigger the victimization on and on. And it comes as if from subconscious, but it's all just consciousness, which you're not, and your personal individual awareness has not reached there. Now, the more you are evolving along life or along your spiritual journey, the more you will become aware of this, that other people simply trigger your distortion. So no one can actually discontinue relationship, because we are all bound on a certain level with thoughts. When you have a relative who is a deceased relative, you go back in your thoughts to them on and on. You remember them. For as long as you remember them, you're connected with them. For as long as you remember your previous partners and they trigger certain emotions, you're connected. You are still in relationship with them, but just on a different level, not maybe on the level you expect to be. So that's why it's so important to realize the lessons of each relationship and to dissolve it within self. When you think about these people, you no longer have any feelings, any ideas, any thoughts, right? You're completely content. Then you can say that that relationship is over and it no longer has an impact on your life. It has no longer karmic impression on your consciousness. As long as other people trigger feelings in you, trepidation of the heart, butterflies in the stomach, crying, anything like that, or even some feelings of dreaming, like what if I did that or this, things would have been better. No things could have been better, because everyone makes choices each moment, and there is no such a thing as destiny, as twin flames, because if you're content, you can find common language with anyone. But at some point, you're able to consciously choose who is more suitable for you and who is not, and who you are able to connect on all levels with, and who you're only connecting maybe mentally and intellectually or work-wise, and who you're connecting now on all levels, like physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And here also is a question of how you express yourself, because your individual expression is the sexuality, and it's not only related to the physical, it's related to the emotional, to the mental, to the intellectual, and how you relate on these levels to other people outside of you. That is your sexuality. When you speak, you express yourself. That is sexuality. That is an emanation. You cannot say that the sun is only that boiling core. The sun is also the emanation of itself. It's the rays, the beams, the warmth, and so on. The same is with the being. We are that emanation, and when we relate to others, we are exchanging that emanation, and we call it sexuality. But sexuality is not based on the physical. Sexuality is based on other aspects of self and how we are aware of those aspects and how we express them to others. The physical part of it comes after, when there is the connection on the mental, intellectual, emotional levels. Then comes the question about the physical connection and the chemistry and how it unfolds. Many people make mistakes because they jump into physical relationships too soon without trying to understand who they're dealing with, how the person is behaving in different situations. And they want to make this distance between themselves closer, because they simply feel insecure, lacking warmth, or they have other traumatic experiences through which their desire to connect and cling to the other increases. And so they do everything possible to shorten the gap at the beginning. And then because of that mistake, or as a mistake, as you can see, they face difficulties because they don't realize that closeness too soon can lead to amplification of certain negative feelings within, and actually of a faster trigger of all the emotional and other traumas in us. So sometimes you need to give it a time to understand how to connect to others, and how to not to connect to others through the illusions we build when we meet someone first. Someone maybe resembles our mother or father, and they attract us, and we don't understand at first why. It's just a pure attraction. But then when we see closer, we see that we're attracted to these people because they resemble someone, because they trigger same emotions. First good emotions, and then they start triggering negative emotions. Because after all, we have not refined ourselves in that area of self-understanding. So they trigger these kind of relationships. Some people may call karmic relationship, but what is karma? Karma is our body that carries all these impulses, that all these impulses within, all these reactions, where do they arise? How do we understand karma? It's not our action. It's our reaction to everything we experience. It triggers because there is an impression in consciousness. So karma is a complex understanding of self, but since the result of the impressions and consciousness is the body is that very karma that carries all these impressions. So karmic relationship means the relationship which will be triggering your emotional distortions, and that will be a learning ground for you. And the karmic relationship can evolve into a spiritual relationship if both people keeping pace with each other and with each other's refinement. If one person just stops or stagnates or chooses to walk away, you have to let them go. Because the other lesson, very important lesson in this world, is the respect of free will. And if there is no respect of free will, if we act upon our inner instinctual negative emotions that arise within ourselves because we feel rejected and hurt, and someone just triggered these feelings, and we feel like we are nothing. So our spiritual narcissistic ideas about ourselves, or our spiritual narcissism, emotional narcissism has been triggered. So we start having these ideas of hate and desire to revenge to another person, or trigger, or go and attract them back in an occult way. These ways we tangle with them more. The more we revenge, the more we are jealous, the more we feel jealous to one another for whichever reason, whether emotional reason or intellectual or spiritual, the more we get tangled with them, the more we get tangled with our own negative feelings, and without realization of that, without refinement of that, we're not able to walk and evolve further. So we stagnate ourselves on an evolutionary path. And without this understanding, we just get more and more tangled in this illusion by getting involved into some occult practices, because our feelings are hurt. So we need to prove others that we can get control over them. So most of our problems in relationship arise because of the victimization program, which is the seed of narcissism. And this narcissism is not just emotional, it's also spiritual. That's why there's so many pseudo-spiritual schools which pet our narcissism, spiritual narcissism, which make us feel special. All of us are special, and on the other hand, we're part of the collective. So the idea of being special or superhero is another idea socially imposed that makes us root more in this disease of victimization. So from victimization, from all these feelings of being rejected, being not loved, or not receiving love in the way you want, pushes us to look for someone who could possibly give a superficial idea of security. yet true security and true feeling of love arise only when you're content, when you discovered your inner contentment, equanimity, blissful awareness. And from that is actually the core of self-love, which is unconditional, which does not control, impose, or desire to be with anyone or anything, yet it can be. These kind of people can easily exist with whoever they choose, and consciously address these relationships. Most of the people are not conscious about themselves, and thus they're not conscious about the relationships. And so all they have is the projection of their victimization programs, insecurities, and desire to control. Because if the more they're insecure, the more they desire to control. The more they feel victimized within self, the more they impose their love on others. But this love is not true love, because true love comes from contentment. And true love actually does not even speak about itself. It's an emanation of a content, blissful being. Awareness, that is all love. If it's something emotional, it's just an emotional love or the emotional way to bind other people to us, to control them. So if you realize all these things and you observe them within yourself, you have a chance to really restructure your relationship, to really understand them in a deeper way, and not to cling to the relationship, but to see it as a way of self-emanation, a flow of self that includes the other person, through which you see also the reflection of self, and you're able to work through that reflection. Especially, the question comes about the one who suffers. In the relationship, let's say one discontinues relationship. One is fine and one suffers. The one who is fine has probably worked out the program within self that was connected with this relationship. The one who suffers has to look at the roots and ask themselves questions. What have I contributed to this separation? But the true question is not about separation. What have I contributed to this feeling? How do I perceive this situation? And then to really open it like layer by layer, seeing that this is just an idea in me. This is just an idea of separation. I'm still connected with that person. So I haven't separated from them. There is nothing permanent, because everything can change. The person left or decided to separate because there was something inside me that was triggering that response. But what is it inside me? Maybe I'm too clingy, maybe I'm too insecure, maybe I'm very victimized, maybe I demand certain things, maybe I control the person, controlled in various ways, because sometimes people don't control. Obviously, they control in a very hidden way, manipulated way. And when something happens in a relationship, you have to understand that everyone in this world is looking for contentment and happiness, but there's no such a thing as happiness. It's actually contentment. So when people leave, it means that either they're not willing to deal with something that is triggered through this relationship, or they are somehow more content by themselves or elsewhere. And so this is a good lesson or reason for us to learn what is within us that makes this scenario possible, especially if it happens many times in your life, especially if you observe the pattern that the many partners have left you in a certain way. So there's something within oneself. It's also, there are other, of course, reasons why relationships discontinue. There are occult interferences, there are ancestral interferences, some other issues, but again, we are not to look for answers elsewhere, because we have to understand what we feel. Because whatever happens to us, we have to ask ourselves, what do I feel? How do I perceive it in my body? And deal only with these perceptions, with the reactions inside. So on the spiritual path, if you want to deal with relationships, you have to understand and be aware deeply of your inner perception of every situation, every relationship, every person, and work on that perception. And if you realize the root causes, if you cannot do anything about it through communication, because communication is one of the most powerful tools. Most of the relationships fail because of lack of proper communication, because people are not able to communicate constructively. They only argue and clash, or they try to impose their will or control through communication, or they try to just express their pain and anger instead of listening and addressing each other in a proper way. That's why usually one of the partners take a distance, or both people take distance, because on the distance you're kind of able to relate to each other in a more respectful way. And this is also one of the most important points, that distance is the most crucial point in a relationship. Yet to understand what is the right distance for each relationship takes time and maturity. Because if you know that someone is able, if you're a conscious person, awakened person, and you see that you're able, that someone you're dealing with is able to digest only 20% of what you're giving, and you're trying to impose 60% on them, the rest of that 40% will bounce back to you. And you will feel, I'm misunderstood, they don't really get what I want. Because you have to understand who you are dealing with. But you cannot understand it if you don't know yourself fully. If you're not feeling contentment, if you're not able to observe things from the awakened perspective. If you're able to do that, to observe from the awakened perspective, every situation, every person, you understand immediately who you're dealing with. So you will give of yourself only that amount that you know the person is able to digest. So you will establish proper distance between you and the other person. And then the clash will not happen. So in order to find this right distance, it takes time. That's why when you meet someone, find a proper distance between you. Not too close, not too far. So that there is always some kind of a flame going on, and some kind of a support and exchange of energy is safe on that distance between you and this particular individual. So this is important. And never resort into victimization and self-pity. Never think that your life is doomed and there is a collapse of the world. If you have these feelings, remember what happened in your childhood that triggered the same feelings, and it will give you a clue. Because there is no such a thing as the end of the world. The end of the world is another idea which is very fruitful and which creates a lot of suffering and pain in people. Our world ends each time when something doesn't go the way we want. So this way, the end of the world is for that ego, which has created a false bubble, an illusion within an illusion. Once you pierce this bubble, the illusion is over, and you feel pain, because that bubble was an isolation between you and the pain, because you just didn't want to deal with the pain. So you found the way to create a bubble, a soft paddy that would not make you feel so painful. And now when someone around who, or the situation, either around work, around money, around relationships, you build these bubbles. Once something changes and the bubble collapses, your whole world collapses, because it wasn't the world, it was the pain that you tried to abstract from. Now, on the spiritual path, every true spiritual path is the way to deal with the pain, because the pain, first of all, brought you here on this planet, to this realm, and triggered your existence. So do not avert from pain. Do not take false teaching which avert you from suffering and put on pink glasses on you and say, create another illusion. You cannot run away from self. You cannot run away from pain. And you cannot run away from the illusion, because the illusion is the projection of you, of that unhealthy you, the victimized you. And now you are to deal with it. And the relationship is the best platform and the playground for it. Because if this is the ability to maintain amazing content relationship is the summit of spiritual wisdom. If you're able, if you're spiritually wise, if you're content inside, if you're equanimous, you will be able to maintain relationship no matter what, and not by sacrificing or by averting, by controlling or anything like that. Through your inner contentment, you will be able to allow other people to understand themselves and to walk with them. But first of all, the choice has to be wise. You have to understand who you are to go with along your path. If you're an awakened and wise person, who you allow to be with you, and what holds you. That it's not only the physical level or emotional. The emotional level should not be unrefined. If the emotional level is unrefined, the relationship is unrefined. That's why the ideal relationship is hardly possible in this time and space continuum, because we all are carrying traumatic experience here and the result of our previous incarnation entanglements. That's why we are all facing each other now. It's like a judgment day time. We've been living for many thousands of years where we just come and experience all our entanglements. And we just to understand this and do it consciously rather than get more engrossed into our victimization programs and self-pity and kind of blindly suffer there. The suffering comes from the ideas. Relationship is an idea. Contemplated. Relationship is always an idea. An idea of how you can hide from your pain or how you can realize your pain. But the idea of relating to other people is always in your head. Everything about this life is pretty much in your head. And relationship is just something that is so powerful as a tool for our evolution that makes us really refine and realize ourselves deeper. But sometimes when something has ended on one level, physical level, ended on other levels too, but ended in such a way that you have a realization of it. And next time, if you decide to build new relationship with someone, do it wisely and consciously, taking into account all these points. And there's one more point. Many times when people break up, they want to return their love or anything, but they cannot return love because there was no love originally. There was a bubble of illusion. So first, you have to regain your confidence level, because true confidence comes from inner contentment of a blissful being and awareness. So if you are able to maintain that, you will appear as an attractive and wise person to others. So they will relate to you in a different way, and you will be able to see your previous relationship or the broken relationship in a different light. And you will be able to learn from them and not to repeat the same mistakes. Or maybe you will be able to, if you see that the partner was good for you and there was just something wrong from your side and you have not been able to maintain that relationship at that point, you can always communicate. But communicate to express yourself honestly. Never manipulate, because all the illusions are based on manipulation, on a distorted way of expressing self. And our society is pushing it even more. We are not able to appear as we are. We have to create all kinds of illusions about ourselves, about our partners, about a way that we can connect to them so that we simply feel good about ourselves. And most of our partnerships and choices of partners is based on the fact that they make us feel good about ourselves. But when they're gone, we again feel bad about ourselves. So it means that all relationships trigger only one thing: self-love. They show us that we don't love ourselves. What does it mean not to love ourselves? It means that we never feel content about ourselves, that our confidence is not within ourselves. Our confidence is always projected outwards and is connected to others and bounced back or reflected back to us, and that's when we feel confident. Someone appreciated me. Someone walked on the street and winked at me. Someone smiled at me. So I feel pretty, or I feel handsome, or I feel sexy. These are false ideas about self and confidence, which are all over propagated at the moment through TV, through interaction with people. Or if I put on fake lashes, I'm more beautiful. If I'm dressed in a certain way, I'm more beautiful. True beauty, true love come from contentment and wisdom. Because even though people can get attracted to each other on a physical level, if there is no attraction and connection on other levels, if there's no like-mindedness, if there's no way of seeing the world in a certain way or gaining something from this interaction, like wisdom, like ideas, like learning, if there's no learning in the relationship overall, the relationship will not sustain itself and eventually will break. Because, and most of the women don't understand it, that's where they resort to occult means to control and sustain a man in relationship. And the reason or the result of that occult interference is that the man eventually becomes an addict because their soul is not happy, yet they can't break through, they can't leave. So they become alcoholics, they become drug addicts, they start cheating but feeling guilt and so on. So there's a lot of karmic entanglement, and women don't understand it, or men who do the same things. So never resort to the occult, because you cannot impose your will. You can, but you are actually harming yourself and the other person. And spirituality is always about non-violence, non-interference, because when you're content, would you interfere? When you're content, you're able to share your ideas, your being, you're able to express yourself sexually very free and unconditionally. And that's why other people feel it and they get attracted. And you choose who you attract closer or further away, or who you keep close to you and who you keep further away from yourself, and on which level you interact with people. You have to be always conscious about it. And if you are not having true confidence, which is based on equanimous being, you will always attract people who will just trigger you, who will show you what is not content within you, what is not refined yet. And whichever way, take it as a learning ground. Make sure you have proper communication with people. You communicate yourself as you are, straight, not in a manipulative way, not in a cunning way, not in a superficial way, showing your appearance in a way that you're really not, or creating an image out of yourself which you're not. All these images, it means that you project distorted sexuality, distorted image of self. And that's why you will attract people in a distorted way who will connect to you, to that image, not to you. And that's why you first have to gain real understanding of who you are before you go into any relationship. That's the main point. Prepare yourself from the beginning. For as long, since you start being aware of yourself and yourself relating to other people, prepare yourself consciously. And then you will understand who to deal with, how to deal with people, how to communicate. And first of all, understand who you are and what is the level of your confidence and how you can gain more confidence through really tapping into your inner being, into your equanimity first. Then you will see that a certain type of people is more suitable for you than the other. So you will not project false image of self so that you would create false partners or partners which would definitely are not suitable for you or will hurt you, or you will feel like you're hurt. You will then approach relationship wiser. You will already understand that this person is not mature for me. So I don't choose this person, no matter how physically attractive that person may be. And not that because I'm afraid that this person will hurt me, because I already know that this kind of people act in a certain way, so I don't react as being hurt to these kind of people. So I don't, in fact, deal with such people. That's these kind of thoughts you will have. So you will not engage with this kind of people. Not because of the fear of being hurt, because if you have a fear of being hurt, or fear of being cheated, or fear of being in whichever situation, you will attract these people because you're not fully conscious, you haven't refined the pain. But if you're wise, you see already in potentiality what people can offer, and you understand on which level you keep relationship with them, on a friendship level, on this particular level, on that particular, or on a personal level where you also engage with them physically and emotionally. So this wisdom is based on contentment, which is the core of self-confidence and self-love. Without it, one only creates distortive idea of love and distortive idea of who I am and who I relate to in relationship, and only suffers in this relationship. The relationship, in fact, is a beautiful ground, a foundation for one's spiritual evolution. But to maintain this foundation is easy at this day and age because of our unawareness and karmic entanglements. But it's not impossible. So try to find your inner core. Thank you. And may all of you be blessed with relationships worthy of you. So work with who you are first to be worthy of good relationships.